prime thing is you have to win.
There you go. There you go. That's what I'm talking about. Hey, Mark, settle down a little bit.
All right, welcome back to the Just Win podcast. I'm Ted Nguyen. That's Marshall Newhouse, and the Raiders are coming off of a 41-21 loss to the Commanders, missing Jaden Daniels. Marcus Mariota came in, had a pretty good game against the Raiders, but there's plenty of issues for us to talk about. Mainly the offensive line. That's going to be a big issue. But I mean, this team just did not look good. Obviously, the Commanders had a big rest advantage playing on Thursday night, and the Raiders had a short week, but that's not an excuse for how they looked. Marshall, what is your first takes on this game?
Yeah, listen, there's not a lot to say good about this game and the performance. And they were on a short week, watching that extra rest. They're going across country, away game, blah, blah, blah. I respect Coach Carroll just saying, hey, it's not acceptable, it's on us. And then Geno after him saying, no, it's not on coach, it's on me. So at the very least, you don't have guys, I feel like, running for excuses. And so to me, that bodes well for a team that is kind of in a retooling mode. And so it still doesn't, remove the sting. No moral victories, no silver lining. But, you hope that, there's guys are pros, and these losses like this sting. And especially, the final score is not indicative of how close it was. It was more lopsided than the final score. But there are moments in this game where you're like, gosh, if they're just guys were just locked in, and execution was a little bit higher, not a little bit higher, quite a bit higher. But there were plays there to be made, and they just weren't being made on offense, defense, and special teams. And we saw this today. The amount of special team stuff going on in the league is crazy. So that's something to be taken for granted on return teams, coverage teams, field goal, block, and field goal protection. But yeah, the Raiders have a lot of leaks and not enough buckets, and so they got to get back to the drawing board.
Yeah, let's get one thing out of the way real quick. Special teams was an issue. The Commanders are the number one team as far as kick return yardage and starting position after kick return, and it makes sense. Deebo Samuel is like perfectly built for this type of kick return format, and we saw that on the first kick. Maybe they should have a better plan as far as trying to slow down that ball from getting to him too quickly, or getting the ball away from him. But he had a big return, and also there was a big punt return late in the game that went for a touchdown in a third quarter that kind of pretty much put this game away. Also, the Raiders starting kick return is just not very good. They're right now they're ranked 21st in the league. It just doesn't seem like there's not a lot of pop to that unit. They don't make a lot of good decisions as far as the returners of when to take the ball out and when not to take the ball out. So that's got to be an issue that gets resolved. Maybe they change returners, or they have some different philosophies as far as how they kick on those kick returns.
Yeah, even with new rules the way they are to incentivize more returns, that position, kick return and punt return, has just been about ball security and courage. That's what it comes down to from a returner's standpoint. And the guys back there definitely seem to lack just the clarity of decision making. And I'm going to make it. I'm going to be decisive, and I'm going to protect the football. And so you see just a drastic difference on the other side of the ball, where Deebo is, like I said, a guy built for this, built like a running back, speed like a receiver, really difficult to tackle. But on an opening kickoff return, the coverage team was out of lanes. They did crossed up. I think the 3 and the 4 crossed up, and no one got back in their true lane. They were pushed out, manhandled a little bit, and that made a return even easier. And then Carlson's attempt at the tackle was just poor. Luckily, they got Deebo down, but again, it's just a tough way to start out a game on the road. You hope that phase of the game, at the very least on the road, is not something that is a liability. And from the beginning, it was a liability. We saw today, again, the importance of that stuff. It is not something to be taken lightly. Again, the Raiders have big issues on offense and defense, but that's something that you hope, if you're trying to play complementary football, the special teams is something that you hope is a strength, both from your kicking team and your coverage teams, but just the discipline. And you have guys who are competing for reps on these teams, on these coverage and return teams, who've got to be your really gritty guys, most accountable guys. So lots to improve there for sure.
Yeah, but obviously you want your special teams unit to play well to give you a chance. But today the offensive line had another bad showing. Interestingly enough, Jackson Powers Johnson was benched today. He was healthy enough to play, but Pete Carroll said after the game that it was a short week and they thought Alex Kappa gave him best chance as far as preparation. So he played, and I think he alluded to that might have been a mistake. But yeah, I mean, I didn't think Kappa was a huge problem, but definitely there was a lack of physicality in the front of the offensive line. They did have their best game as far as yards before carry. So, I mean, Genty did get hit in the backfield a couple times, but it was an improvement from before. It used to be negative yards before carry. They actually had a little positive 0.64, so not even 1 yard before carry, but at least 0.64 positive before carry. Somebody in the chat asked if you're ready to come out of retirement to play for the Raiders again. But yeah, this would be a great time for you to diagnose what's going on with the line.
Yeah, I mean, a stat I saw was Gentry was hit at or behind the line 11 of 17 of his rushes on the season, and he's at 57% getting hit at or behind the line. You know, I made a comment about Ryan Clark's comment about Ashton Gentry not having it, and I just disagree with that premise altogether for a rookie running back, especially a rookie running back who we know has so much promise and we saw so much in college, but literally has not had a clean slate so far from his offensive line and from the play calling. And so it's just too early to tell on that. But yeah, if you're not getting a chance to really get downhill, it's a non-starter for a guy like him, even as explosive. And listen, he's breaking tackles at a top 5 rate. That is what his game is. He's a tough guy to bring down. If you get him into these rush lanes with angles, he sets up blocks well and he makes guys miss. Arm tackles don't work very well, and one-on-one versus DBs, I said it last week, I'll say it again, is where you want this guy. And they just could not consistently get the combo blocks up to the second level with enough movement, with enough space. We understand these holes in the NFL are smaller. They're smaller and they close quicker, but he is still capable, more than capable enough of hitting them and getting you yards after contact and adding to the explosiveness of his offense. And him not really having a chance on over 57% of his rushes so far just screams inefficiency. It screams just a lack of identity in this front right now. The offensive line unit. You have your stalwart in Colton Miller, I still believe is playing pretty well, but the other 4 guys at this point have not shown the cohesiveness and the grit and the toughness and the consistency to give a guy like Ashton Gentry, and then we'll talk about Geno as well, their needed protection. And until that improves, until Brendan Carroll finds something out, finds a combination that works, and finds a identity for this group, it's going to be a tough year for Ashton and the entire offense. Yeah,
DJ Glaze struggled in pass protection at times. He got beat for a couple really noticeable times by Von Miller by one. I think it was Armstrong by another. And there was just, I think what's also concerning is just like free runners. And that seems to me like communication issues. Yeah. I sent you a play earlier where there's a blitzer right up the middle. And I think that was probably on Parham, because it was like it ended up being a 2-man rush to his side, and it ended up being Parham and Miller blocking one guy, and then the blitzer got right through the A gap. So I think Parham's got to see that and block that up. So aside from the physical issues, I mean, I think DJ Glaze is just struggling physically right now. There's some coaching issues as well, because like there's no communication between the line. They're struggling to adjust when the picture changes before the snap, and that's even more concerning to me.
Yeah, that's definitely something that's concerning, because at the very least, if all 5 guys, we always said this, if us 5 are on the same page with the quarterback and the running back, even if he sends us the wrong way or we go the quote-unquote wrong way, but if we're all on the same page, the play still has a chance to work. But the clip you sent me and many others where I see a point from the guard, usually in away games with loud crowd noises, your team has philosophy. The center has his head between his legs, or he has his head up, and the guard taps, the guard looks, the guard signals, or the center does a lot of that. one way or the other, the initial call is set by one of the inside three. Then you hopefully have a quarterback who adjusts or, hey, you hear it on mic sometimes, hey, where are you going? That's normal. And so not having that consistently happen is a problem, absolutely. And it's just a problem with protection and preparation. And again, the clip you sent me, there was a point by the right guard, and then I saw Geno vaguely point, and then Parham goes with his D tackle initially, which we block the down, known rushers first, but you've got to play ball. Even if that's not your designated guy, if I know where the strength of protection is, I know where my quarterback's hot, I know that where one guy goes, someone's coming from that area more than likely. So that inside, that three technique was slanting outward for contain. That means the guy's either coming up the middle or a backside D lineman is filling that gap. Rarely are there just wide open spaces. Defenses have lanes and rush gaps to fill. And so for him to not feel that, you hope Colton Miller, his DN drops, you say, go, go, go. Parham passes it off. You retreat a little bit. You buy some time. You pick up a late rusher. Even if it's a little late, the quarterback feels that there's not color unimpeded running at him. He gets to set his feet, move a little bit, try to complete the pass. It's not always pretty, but you're thinking on the fly. And yeah, if things aren't perfect, which, oh, by the way, they usually aren't, because no matter how much you study, no matter how much you prepare, there are always unscouted looks. And so if your fundamentals and the foundation of your protection aren't there, then you see guys running free. Bobby Wagner had 5 pressures and 2 sacks on 4-man rushes. For a guy that's struggling at his older age, he's a Hall of Famer, but he's struggling covering in space. You know what he's out there for. He's out there to fill the run gaps and rush the passer in certain downs. And so Dan Quinn's using these simulated pressures, these blitz zones very well. And Bobby Wagner is getting home. For him to have 2 sacks is just, to me, inexcusable, especially if they weren't at more guys than we had blocking at the moment. And so, yeah, there's communication issues, deciding in away situations or just generally, does the line set the protection and the quarterback adjusts? Does the quarterback set everything, or does the line set everything? Whatever works for you, figure it out and do it. But not having guys free running up the A gap is literally the biggest no-no. Tom Brady wouldn't allow it. Tom Brady couldn't function when that was happening. So you expect Geno to function when that's happening, and that doesn't make sense. I give Geno a ton of credit for the passing yards, obviously a lot in garbage time, 3 touchdowns, 5 sacks, and no interceptions. The pressure he was under and not throwing a pick is one of those small things that, yes, it's in a loss, but that is you still had a chance to stay in the game because he wasn't turning the ball over. But he just had a rough day setting his feet and moving and maneuvering from a clean pocket.
Yeah, and we couldn't see the all 22, but the commentators spoke on it. They said nobody was open downfield. And that's an issue. I'm looking at Brock Bowers, and it looks like he's still struggling to move. It's not as crisp and explosive as he was before the injury. And Dante Thornton is just not the route runner that he needs to be right now. Like the first throw to him, it looked like it. I mean, pre-snap, it looked like it should be open. You got an off man and you're running a curl, and you don't even get that corner to budge at all. And then, Geno's throwing a trust throw basically, and it almost gets picked off. So, but this was an encouraging game for Trey Tucker. I mean, a lot of the yardage was garbage time yardage, but I mean, when you watch the tape, he's getting open. He's a smooth route runner. So hopefully this is a kind of game that could propel him into bigger things. But just getting back to the offensive line for one more moment, like what would you do as far as are there moves for this line to make? Do you stick with the same guys and hope it gets better? Oh, what is it? Where did the Raiders go from here?
The fact to me that they're having communication issues and there's been poor technique and poor execution means there's nothing to save for in shaking the lineup right now. Pete Carroll alluded to that, still an open competition. I believe them not hitting this week led to him not wanting to go with Jackson Paris-Johnson. So hopefully with an extra a normal week of preparation and hitting, he gets to get his chance. I don't know if they'll shuffle the center. Generally, the center is one that you want to change out less just because from a QB trust factor. We talked about Meredith having snapping issues. I didn't see a lot of that today. So hopefully some of that is corrected and leaving him as one less moving piece. We always said when you move multiple guys, you get worse at multiple positions instead of having one guy in, one guy out. That's easier said than done. And the Raiders, I feel like, are approaching a moment of desperation. But, you know, JPG at right guard and maybe Kappa and Parham competing to see at left guard what they can do, or JPG at left guard and vice versa. So right now, there's definitely got to be some competition and some asking about who wants it, who's the leader, what are we going to be? And then I think ultimately there's got to be some moments where we just full line slide. It sucks. It's old school football where you send the running back backside and the line zones full slide left or full slide right, but all the gaps are accounted for. It's less versatile of a protection scheme. It's easier to scheme around, but it makes things very clean and very clear in moments. You can't do it every play, but it a lot of times removes a guy like Genty from catching routes out of the backfield. But it just removes a lot of the communication. Hey, Louis or Ringo, we're going left or we're going right. It allows the front side tackle to, you know, pick up the widest guy if they bring a corner off the edge. And then it allows you to pass off a lot of the middle dog crosses, the games, the simulated pressures. And then the quarterback knows my backside with the running back, or if I keep leaving running back and a tight end in, if they're against a legit rusher, it's going to be real shaky over there. That's where I have to float from to buy more time. That's where my pressure is. And so that's a very basic thing to do in protection. Especially if you're trying to block a lot of man and the guys just aren't holding up. You got to throw some of that in there. But also, listen, ultimately, what protects offensive lines, and we see this with the best units, even Philadelphia, Lane Johnson, Jordan Mailata, two of the best in the game, if just drop back passing. They would hate if I told you, hey, we're going in this game and we got to throw it 45 times from shotgun 4 wide. That's just a hard way to make a living. They also have play action. They have a running game that causes a threat. They have, you know, very creative scheming that gets a tackle help, whether it's from a small bump on a play action, or he gets to run cell and jump a guy, or by alignment, he's got, you know, spacing from a bunch receiver or a tight end or a running back. There's a lot of ways to supplement the protection that I think the Raiders can still use, because they're going to have to get creative, because just manning things up all game 30, 40 times a game is just not going to do it at this point. That's not going to get you better. And then the O-line also has to help themselves out by being better in the run game, being better at straining on these combo blocks, firing off, whether we're outside zone, inside zone, maybe some one back, two back power, finding something that we do well and doing it to death, doing it, you know, as best we can. And then you throw a play action off that. You get Brock Bowers off of power, you know, kind of like Gronk did, where you get him on the backside shallow, or you get him up the seam. You get Dante Thornton and Trey Tucker on these deep crossing routes that their speed really, you know, gives you a chance. That big play in the first quarter was a really, you know, done play action, but it's a deep crossing route that puts pressure on linebackers who are trying to cover these hook zones, that puts pressure on boundary corners. It makes guys really open their eyes to these deep threats. And that, you know, good play action sells that. And so a lineman group can help themselves by adding to the run game in protection. Because if my coach knows, hey, I know this play fake's going to have a little bit of sell because of how we've been pushing it down their throats a little bit, I'm more likely to call that. And that's less moments where I'm just drop back passing Von Miller and guys are getting to pin their earbacks in the obvious passing situation. So you can help yourself, and I believe they need to do more of that. But ultimately, they've got to find a starting five who can get the job done. So that's going to be part of this next week.
Yeah, I wonder if Charles Grant is getting worked as a right tackle in practice. Not because, you know, like they drafted him as a left tackle, and I think that's where mostly his experience is at. But I wonder if he's getting cross-trained at right tackle in case they want to get a look at right tackle for somebody else besides DJ Glaze, just because we know Grant has a very high ceiling as far as just his physical tools that he has.
Best five out there. If that means bumping the guy down, unfortunately, moving more guys around, okay, fine. Get your best five out there and give everybody a chance. Just give Genty and Geno a chance to do what they do well.
Yeah. And as far as play calling, I know there's some people complaining about play calling, but it's a hard life to live when you can't run block and it's hard to pass block. So I'm going to reserve judgment as far as play calling until they can do the simple things right. And right now, it's tough to do that.
Yeah.
And also, like, Gentry's got to get his his pass blocking fixed or his blitz pickup down, because it's, you're drafted 6 overall. You can't make an impact if you're off the field as much as he is in passing downs. And clearly they don't trust him on passing downs, because they're putting in Labe in those situations. And then, when you're in a 2-minute drill, there's times you have to run the ball. Like, that last drive where they ran the ball on 3rd and 1 and 4th and 1. Labe couldn't get the first down. I think Gentry probably gets that first down, but he's not in because the situation doesn't call for him to be in. So that's something that he just needs to improve on to kind of, make that draft capital worth it.
Yeah, you don't draft a running back that high who can't be a 3-down back. He's got to figure that out. But that feels to me, obviously he's a rookie. There's a lot being thrown at him. Fine, but that's why you make the money. But it feels to me he is also part of and a victim of this lack of cohesion with the entire protection unit. We used to have blitz pickup meetings, the linemen, the quarterbacks, and the running back. Everyone who was going to be in the backfield, we went through all our cards for blitz for that coordinator for that week. Some things he's done way in the past that we might see, just so we had an idea. We talked through it, we visualized, we sat in our seats and we clapped through it. Like, that type of stuff builds trust in a unit, because again, things will be messy. If 5 or 6 or 7 people in protection are on the same page, anything can work. I remember with Aaron Rodgers, we had plays where he had a gut feeling he saw about a boundary blitz. He took us into it, back versus those AA mugs when they were really hot with Chicago and Minnesota. They came and they fooled us. Okay, they fooled us. We all slid right. The guy slid left. Aaron floated into it. But he bought himself enough time because he knew where we were going, and he made a play, because when they're simulating that pressure, there's a lot of one-on-ones. If you can give the guy a quarterback time, there's matchups to be had. Even with this receiving core that we haven't, lauded as much, it's the NFL. There's matchups to be had, but you've got to be on the same page first. And so they got to get to the drawing board, and Gentry has to be a part of that, because he's too good of a player to then every 3rd down he's tapping out or lobs running in or 2-minute drill, like you said. That's just not good enough for him. And so he's got to get him up to speed, and that might mean extra film, literally going in early when the quarterbacks go, so that when they are breaking down the next team, which will be tomorrow, he's in there with Geno talking about protections.
Yeah, and there's a lot of people calling for Brendan Carroll, Pete Carroll's son, who's also the offensive line coach, never had experience as the main offensive line coach in NFL until this year. A lot of people are calling for his head. Obviously, the offensive line isn't where you want it to be, but I'm not there at practice. I don't know what they're teaching. Right. But I will say that those issues, as far as just communication, getting a hat on a hat, all those things you talked about, they need to get fixed. Like, if that keeps happening, then that's totally on the offensive line coach. Like, it's one thing to get physically beat, but it's another when you just can't get on the same page. So,
around until you set that, and it seems so obvious, but like, you take it for granted when offenses do it well, because you don't really feel it. But now when the offense is discombobulated, you understand that it's a non-starter for any offense to really do what they need to do. And again, I'm not in a place to judge the offensive line coach either. I haven't been at practice. I'm not there in those meeting rooms. What I do see is, and how I can quote unquote judge an offensive line coach and unit, is in their identity and culture that is then put on tape on game day. And the tape I'm seeing is just disorganization, a little chaos, not the same page. And so however they get it done, however his coaching style is, it's got to show itself in these moments, because people are going to keep piling on you. I've been in that situation. It won't stop until you show us on Sundays, because we're not supposed to be there. That is your team. That is your job. Show us on Sundays that you can get this stuff fixed, and that there's an attitude behind it in the run and pass game. And that's what we'll judge you on. And so far, it hasn't looked great, but I know there's a lot of pride in that room, a lot of pride in that organization, and they will be on the right path to fix it. But it's got to show up on Sundays.
Yep. And it's a little bit concerning, because this has been kind of like a Pete Carroll calling card for a while. He just has not been able to get his offensive lines fixed in his years coaching in Seattle, or the recent years coaching in Seattle. So we'll see what happens with that. Defensively, they didn't have a great game either. I just thought they didn't have a good plan for the run option game. There was just times where the defensive ends, I mean, and it's a very hard defense for defensive ends. Patrick Graham talked about that coming into the game. But it's just like, it's just issues like you're being too aggressive. Nobody's filling in for you when you're crashing the run, quarterback's wide open. Running down the lane, or you're not being aggressive enough, and then the running back has a huge lane. So, it just wasn't good enough. This was the 5th ranked run defense as far as rushing success rate, and they got killed today. And tackling was a huge issue. I mean, that 60-yard run by McNichols where you had 2 guys on him, you just fall off of him. That's unacceptable. And I don't know. And they were a pretty good tackling team. They were one of the best tackling teams coming into this game. So I don't know if it was a rest issue or what, but that was not a good defensive effort from the Raiders.
In 2012, we went into a playoff game in San Francisco against Kaepernick. He had taken over for Alex Smith, and we went into that game. Everyone understood part of their scheme with Greg Roman was the zone read out of pistol with Colin Kaepernick. He could and was going to run the ball. And in that game, I rewatched it so many times, our defensive ends looked lost. And it was like, I'm an offensive guy. We have to take up our own stuff. You could play better, whatever. But it looked as if they hadn't practiced for a guy like Colin Kaepernick to keep the ball sometimes. And it looked at times like they forgot Marcus Mariota has a really good scrambling ability and will keep a zone read and stuff like that. And they forgot that Cliff Kingsbury is calling plays, and he has all this stuff in his arsenal. And then ultimately, 174 yards rushing in the first half it's an indictment on that day of what that team was trying to do and you allowed them to do. And tackling was part of that. That 60-yard run added to the average, but even without that, they're averaging like 7.1 yards per attempt, something like that. It was just it was unlike what we've seen through 2 weeks. The defense that, despite the shortcomings, had kept them in games, had been staunch against the run. There were times where, they ran a lot of outside zone, really challenged them on the move. The interior linemen were just not in their lanes. I don't know if they were being asked to gap or shoot gaps, but they were being pushed out of their run defend lanes, and there were huge gaps in there, and that's tough on linebackers. Defenses are always trying to prevent O-line combos from getting to the linebackers too quickly, and that has to do with defensive line causing chaos and taking up blocks, making a guard and a center, guard and a tackle spend longer than they want to and not have as much movement as they want to before they get to the second level, and the linebacker has more room to run around. And the Raiders and Pratt and their linebacker core looked like they were a little bit late. And again, the tackling just wasn't sure as displayed on that 60-yard run. And so that to me was concerning just because that has been their strength so far. And that's something that you can hang your hat on because you give your defense and your team a chance to win when a team's run game is stifled a little bit, shut down, slowed down. Then you're getting them in non-passing situations. And even if your secondary is struggling, giving them opportunities, giving Max Crosby an opportunity to pass rush and a defensive cornerback to then cover, knowing that a guy like Max Crosby is pass rushing. Those are really good symbiotic things, but they weren't even getting into a lot of those situations today. And that's just a hard way to live. And listen, at the time of that 60-yard run, the score was 10-10. There was, 3 minutes and 40 seconds left in the half. This game was not out of reach. This game was not a runaway. There's no reason for them to have that kind of run, give up that kind of run, and then the game to get out of hand. But it can happen. If you let go of the rope, it can happen. And so the Raiders can have to sleep at night knowing that this game was not out of touch. They just were not performing to their standard in the way that I think they can, even though there's holes, and we talked about them. We continue to talk about them. This was not a game that should have ended up like it did, in my opinion.
Yeah, and as an example of a team that had some offensive line issues, they were doing a bunch of shuffling on their offensive lines, trying to figure it out. Josh Connerly, their right tackle, has struggled massively and struggled in this game too, but they're able to overcome that because, one, they could run the ball. It's a very unique running system, but they were able to run the ball, quick passing game, and when they wanted to take shots, they just max protect and were able to get some shots downfield. So those are, the things that you can do when everything is organized and you're on the same page and you have that communication. So,
they had a running game to then play action off of. And then when they did drop back, Mariota's time to throw was 2.3 seconds. I mean, he was getting rid of the ball. So that's a tough day for a defensive pass rush unit. So I understand that. That was the concerted plan going in. And so you've got to just fight against that. You've got to be able to play tighter coverage, be able to play better on first and second downs, and get Marcus Mariota uncomfortable. He used to play here. You know what his strengths and weaknesses are. It's not a surprise. He's a veteran, savvy quarterback. He still is who he is. He has not changed a whole lot since his last time in the Raiders uniform. And so to see him have this much success, the scrambles are one thing because, when you have everything covered and you're in man, your back's turned, that happens. But to have it happen in zone read and to have his arm really beat you at times. I mean, that seed he threw over the top down the field off of play action was just an incredible throw. But how do you let your guy get behind you? There's just a lot of moments that Jaden Daniels would have done worse. He would have worse as in would have beat you worse. I mean, he's a better quarterback than Mariota, obviously. And so giving up that kind of production to Marcus Mariota is a level of concerning I don't think the Raiders were prepared for.
Yeah, and I don't want to make excuses. Maybe the rest was a factor, but this is a game that you obviously you learn from and you have to try to put behind you because it was ugly. So let's get into some questions. Trip donated $5 and asked Marshall, do you have an autopsy on his offensive line? Which players are responsible for the mess? Brendan Carroll, thank you, and go Raiders. We kind of talked about this, but you want to answer that question?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's all the way around. And that's not a specific answer, but it starts with communication. If we all don't know where we're going in run and pass, nothing works from that beginning. We saw multiple times the points from the guard and the quarterback were different. Guys' eyes were in different places. And that's just a non-starter. That speaks directly to Ashton Jeanty being hit at 57% at or behind the line of scrimmage so far this season. They've got to get that worked out. If that means simplifying some things, fine. If that means designating one guy who is always making the point, always making the call. I remember we used to have multiple teams. The tackle who was close to the sideline when we're in the huddles facing the line of scrimmage, he'd listen to a play out of one ear and he would say 4 down, 3 down. Right when we're walking to the line. So right then you've got some piece of information. So little things like that communicate to the rest of the group what are we in for when everyone gets to the line of scrimmage, and then you communicate from there. But listen, it's inexcusable. They're working on it. I promise you they're working on it, but it's got to get fixed fast or you can't even get anything started when you're not on the same page in that way.
Yep. All right. Next question from Jose Almos. How can this offensive line be improved? Is it talent or bad scheme? Does this fall on coaching staff? Or is Dylan Labe in pass pro? I'm not sure what that last part means.
Listen,
I guess they're asking about Dylan Labe in pass pro.
Well, I mean, it's obvious he's the better pass protector so far over Jeanty just from knowing where to go. I mean, if your running back's not on the same page with the rest of the pass protection unit, that's a non-starter. QBs can't trust that. You can't trust them on third downs. But listen, there might be a talent issue in this offensive line ultimately, but I've seen less talented offensive lines still be successful. Those Pete Carroll Seattle lines, when they were really churning, they had guys like J.R. Sweezy at guard, who was a converted defensive tackle. His strength was he could run laterally and cut the hell out of you. And that's what he did, and he did it well. He wasn't a great pass protector. He did his best, and they game planned for that. But he did do one thing really, really well, and he did it with grit, and he pissed guys off. And he made a living doing that. He made millions of dollars doing that. So a guy like Parham, a guy like JPJ, Meredith, it matters less about your talent level and what you're doing to lean into your strengths and give it all out there on the field and live by what you do well and let your coaches figure out what to do with what you don't do well with the scheme. That is what really good units and really good teams do. So, yes, maybe they need to go in the draft, and that's for future planning. That's why you have a personnel department. But right now, you're with the horses that you brought, and you got to lean into their strengths, and they've got to, take on the challenge and step their game up for sure.
And I do think Genty has the potential to be a really good running pass blocker because he just has that lower body. You see that thump he has.
Yeah.
Like he can stonewall guys if he just, gets into the mentality of knowing where he needs to block, where it's coming from, his technique. I mean, my comparison for him was a mini Maurice Jones-Drew, and a supercharged Maurice Jones-Drew. And Maurice Jones-Drew, he's a beast in pass blocking. So,
Yes.
It's all about just that learning where to go and honing in your technique.
Yeah,
in my opinion.
I agree with that.
All right, next question: should Bowers get more than 5 targets? When I watch him, he just looks like he's straining to move right now. Maybe next week he'll look a little bit better. And also even when he's strained, teams are trying to take him away. So I have to watch all 22 to see if he's getting open. But it's rough right now because we talked about this. He's the Raiders' #1 receiver, and when he's not at 100%, it just kind of puts everybody up a peg. And I just don't know if they have the talent to do that.
Yeah, listen, he's gotten through it right now, but you just see linebackers or safeties, whoever's covering him, in his hip pocket stride for stride. You don't want Geno forcing those balls. He got his 5 targets and he still is, attracts a lot of attention, but he's just not all the way there yet. And so unfortunately, there's just not as many opportunities. Now you can manufacture some opportunities if you had a more robust play action game with, some tight end leaks, some shallows against man. There's a lot of different ways to do it, but ultimately his change of direction is a liability right now. That he's got that huge brace, and I just feel for him because he is trying. He's got some targets. There was a pass there in the red zone that he definitely could have had, but listen, the guys are keeping up with him in a way that they normally do not. So that tells you he's just not where he needs to be.
All right. Will the bleeding stop versus the Bears next week? The Bears look very good offensively. I mean, I rewatched that game against the Lions. Like that, Caleb Williams is playing much better than people think he is, and he came out and showed out against the Cowboys today. So it's definitely not going to be a team you can roll over. But I will say this is probably the worst defense that the Raiders have seen. So if they can't get it together against this defense, then there's some trouble brewing.
Yeah, listen, Ben Johnson and Caleb Williams are hitting their stride. He had almost 300 yards passing, 4 touchdowns today. He still does Caleb Williams things, which gives you opportunities to pick him off, gives you opportunities for ball security. I still don't believe they have a stout enough rushing game, and so this is a game for your defense to kind of buck up and show who they are, and cause some chaos for a still young, figuring it out quarterback. And then the defense can be had by this Raiders unit, but the Raiders unit has their own problems to solve. And so, again, in the film room this week, who are we going to? Where are the combo blocks going? What kind of schemes are we uniquely going to put in for this Chicago Bears front? Let's crawl before we can walk, so that Ash Genty has a chance. And then when Ash Genty has a chance, he makes plays. Geno Smith's play action game. I mean, we're gonna be nauseous saying it, but this is where good offenses are built, because the other route is throwing to set up the run. Well, we've seen them try to throw to set up the run, and that leads to protection issues. They're just not built for that right now. And so you've got to do what your most opportune chance is to do. And right now it's to try to get a run game going. And you can do that with physicality and effort to start, and then see where the chips fall.
Yep. All right. Last question. When you look at the opportunity to build an organization, was it a mistake, no matter what Genty can be, to pass on a prospect like Membu? Because when you get here, you can't fix the offensive line without big investments. I like this question because it was a big debate coming into the draft. I for one, was pushing for them to push to draft Membu, even though I love Genty and everything that he could be. I just thought you can't pass up on a right tackle. I love Membu as a prospect, and he's doing pretty well right now for the Jets. I mean, he had a phenomenal week 1, kind of regressed week 2. I didn't see how he did in week 3, but I mean, the tools are there for him to be, like an anchor at right tackle, and it's a high value position. It's the Raiders went with Genty, and they didn't fix their offensive line. So the philosophy is that they think Genty is so special that they would rather take him now and fix the offensive line later. This approach is controversial because it just doesn't. We haven't seen it work very often. So we'll see if the Raiders can do it. But what do you think, Marshall?
Yeah, this is all about your view of value and the Raiders' view of value. And this is where that conversation about how much influence Tom Brady has on personnel and organization building. Because, yeah, like you said, a lot of debate over the value of Genty, despite how good he is at pick six, when you've got an aging Colton Miller and you don't have a sure thing at right tackle. So Membu being a guy who would not be a perfect plug and play rookie tackle. It's a steep learning curve, but over time is a guy who could, his Mizzou film was really impressive. He played against top tier talent. So him being at right tackle, learning on the fly. And yeah, maybe you have Labe and a different guy now running behind him, but you feel better about the future prospects of the protection unit, the run blocking unit. And so it's just a matter of philosophy. And so we're finding out kind of this Pete Carroll / Tom Brady outfit, what they're valuing. And that doesn't mean that if they had to do it over again, they'd make the same pick, but they did make the pick. And so we'll see. Hopefully in theory, their pick is worse in the first round next year, meaning they had a good end of the season and what they do with that pick next year. But we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. But yeah, it remains to be seen. We'll see what they value ultimately in the long term.
Yeah, and maybe who knows? Maybe Charles Grant becomes a guy that they could plug and play. We'll see where it goes. It's still early, but I will say I'm typically in the philosophy of build the offensive line first, take the high value positions early in the draft.
Yeah.
But the Raiders did what they did, and we'll see if they could get their way, build that offensive line and make Genty a worthwhile investment.
Yep, I agree.
All right, that's all we have for you today. Thank you, Marshall, for joining, giving your insight as always. Thank you guys all for joining. Make sure you like and subscribe on YouTube. Make sure you leave a review and rate on Spotify and Apple. We'll join you guys midweek and talk about the Bears. Get this taste out of your mouths, drink some beers, watch Sunday Night Football, and we'll talk to you soon.
Appreciate everybody. Thanks for tuning in.